The Gallant Tailor. One summer morning, a little tailor was sitting on his board near the window, and working cheerfully with all of his might, when an old woman came down the street crying, "Good jelly to sell, good jelly to sell." The cry sounded pleasant to the little tailor's ears, so he put his head out of the window and called out, "Here, my good woman, come here, if you want a customer." So the poor woman climbed the steps with her heavy basket, and was obliged to unpack and display all of her pots to the tailor. He looked at every one of them, and lifting all the lids, applied his nose to each, and said at last, "The jelly seems pretty good. You may weigh me out 4 half-ounces, or I don't mind having 1/4 pound." The woman, who had expected to find a good customer, gave him what he asked for, but went off angrily and grumbling. "This jelly is a very good thing for me," cried the little tailor. "It will give me strength and cunning." And he took down the bread from the cupboard, cut a hole round of the loaf, and spread the jelly on it, laid it near him, and went on stitching more gallantly than ever. All the while the scent of sweet jelly was spreading throughout the room, where there were quantities of flies, who were attracted by it and flew to partake. "Now then, who asked you to come?" asked the little tailor. He drove the unbidden guests away, but the flies, not understanding his language, were not to be got rid of so easily, and returned in larger numbers than before. Then the tailor, not being able to stand it any longer, took from his chimney corner a ragged cloth, and saying, "Now I'll let you have it," and he beat among them unmercifully. When he ceased and counted the slain, he found 7 lying dead before him. "This is indeed somewhat satisfying," he said, wondering at his own gallantry. "The whole town shall know of this." So he hastened to cut out a belt, and he stitched it, and put in large capital letters, 7 at 1 blow. "The town, did I say?" said the little tailor. "The whole world shall know of this." And his heart quivered with joy like a lamb's tail. The tailor fastened the belt around him, and began to think of going out in the world, for his workshop seemed too small for his worship. So he looked about all the house for something that would be useful to take with him, but he found nothing but an old wheel of cheese, which he put in his pocket. Outside the door he noticed that a bird had gotten caught in the bushes, so he took that as well, and put it in his pocket next to the cheese. Then he set out gallantly on his way, and as he was light and active, he felt no fatigue. The way led over a mountain, and when he had reached the topmost peak, he saw a terrible giant sitting there and looking all about. The tailor went bravely up to him, called out to him, and said, "Comrade, good day. There you sit, looking over the great wide world. I am on my way hither and thither to seek my fortune. Have you a fancy to go with me?" The giant looked at the tailor contemptuously and said, "You little rascal, you miserable little fellow." "Well, that may be," answered the little tailor, and undoing his coat he showed the giant his belt. "You can read there whether I am man or not." The giant read the belt, 7 at 1 blow, and thinking it meant men rather than flies, he felt at once more respect for the little fellow. But as he wanted to prove to him, he took up a stone and squoze it so hard that water came out of it. "Now, can you do that?" asked the giant. "I mean, if you have the strength for it." "That's not much," said the little tailor. "I call that child's play." And he put his hand in his pocket and took out the cheese and squoze it so that the whey ran out of it. "Well," he said, "what do you think of that?" The giant did not know what to say, for he could not have believed the little man capable of such a thing. Then the giant took up a stone and threw it so high that it was nearly out of sight. "Now, little fellow, suppose you can do that." "Well thrown, my good fellow," said the tailor. "The stone fell back to earth again. I will throw you one that will never come back." So he felt in his pocket, took out the bird, and threw it into the air. And the bird, when it found itself at liberty, took wing, flew off, and returned no more. "What do you think of that, comrade?" asked the tailor. "There is no doubt that you can throw," said the giant, "but we shall see if you can carry." He led the little tailor to a mighty oak tree which had been felled and was lying on the ground, and said, "Now, if you are strong enough, help me carry this tree out of the woods." "Willingly," answered the little man. "You take the trunk on your shoulders. I will take the branches with all their foliage. That is the much more difficult side." So the giant took the trunk on his shoulders, and the tailor seated himself on a branch, and the giant, who could not see behind him, carried the whole tree, the man included. And the little man was very cheerful and merry, and whistled the tune, "There were 3 tailors riding by, as if carrying the tree were mere child's play." The giant, when he had struggled on under his heavy load for part of the way, was tired out and cried, "Look here, I must let go of the tree." The tailor jumped off quickly, and taking hold of the tree with both arms, as if he were carrying it, said to the giant, "You see, you can't carry the tree, though you are such a big fellow." They went on together a little further, and presently they came to a cherry tree, and the giant took hold of the topmost branches where the ripest fruit hung, and pulled them downwards, and gave them to the little tailor to hold, bidding him to eat. But the little tailor was much too weak to hold the tree, and as the giant let go, the tree sprang back, and the tailor was caught up in the air. And when he dropped down again without any damage, the giant said to him, "How is this? Haven't you the strength enough to hold down such a weak little sprig as that?" "It is not strength that is lacking," answered the little tailor. "How should it be that one has slain 7 at one blow? I just jumped over the tree because the hunters are shooting down there in the bushes. You jump too if you can." The giant made the attempt, and not being able to vault the tree, he remained hanging in the branches, so that once more the little tailor got the better of him. Then said the giant, "As you are such a gallant fellow, suppose you come with me to our den and stay the night." The tailor was quite willing, and he followed him. When they reached the den, there sat some other giants by the fire, and each had a roasted sheep in his hand, and was eating it. The little tailor looked round and thought, "There is more elbow room here than in my workshop." And the giant showed him a bed, and told him that he had better lie down upon it and go to sleep. The bed was, however, too big for the tailor, so he did not stay in it, but crept into a corner to sleep. As soon as it was midnight, the giant got up, took a great staff of iron, and he beat the bed through with one giant stroke, and supposed he had made an end of that grasshopper of a tailor. Very early in the morning, the giants went into the woods and forgot all about the little tailor, and when they saw him coming after them alive and merry, they were terribly frightened, and, thinking he was going to kill them, they ran away in all haste. So the little tailor marched on, always following his nose, and after he had gone a great ways, he had entered the courtyard belonging to a king's palace, and there he felt so overpowered with fatigue that he lay down and fell asleep. In the meanwhile came various people, who looked at him very curiously, and read on his belt, 7 at one blow. "Oh," said they, "why should this great lord come here in time of peace? What a mighty champion he must be." Then they went to the king and told him about the fellow with the belt, and they thought that if war should break out, what a worthy and useful man he would be, and that he ought not to be allowed to depart at any price. The king then summoned his council, and sent one of his courtiers to the little tailor to beg him, as soon as he could wake up, to consent to serve to the king's army. So the messenger stood and waited at the sleeper's side until his limbs began to stretch and his eyes to open, and then he carried his answer back, and the answer was, "That was the reason for which I came. I am ready to enter the king's service." So he was received into it, and very honorably, and a separate dwelling set apart for him. But the rest of the soldiers were very much set against the little tailor, and they wished him 1,000 miles away. "What shall be done about it?" they said among themselves. "If we pick a quarrel and fight with him, then 7 of us will fall with each and every blow. That will be no good to us." So they came to a resolution, and went all together to the king to ask for their discharge. "We never intended," they said, "to serve with a man who kills 7 at a blow." The king felt sorry to lose all of his faithful servants because of one man, and he wished that he had never seen him, and would willingly get rid of him if he might. But he did not dare dismiss the little tailor for fear that he should kill all of the king's people, and place himself upon the throne. He thought a long while about it, and at last made up his mind what to do. He sent for the little tailor, and told him that he was so great a warrior that he had a proposal to make to him. He told him that in the woods, in his domains, dwelt 2 giants, who did great damage by robbery, murder, and fire, and that no man durst go near them for fear of his life. But that if the tailor should overcome and slay both of these giants, the king would give him his only daughter in marriage, and half of his kingdom as a dowry, and that 100 horsemen should go with him to give him assistance. "That would be something for a man like me," thought the little tailor. "A beautiful princess and half a kingdom are not to be had every day." And he said to the king, "Oh yes, I can soon overcome the giants, and yet have no need of 100 horsemen. He who can kill 7 at one blow has no need to be afraid of 2. So the little tailor set out, and 100 horsemen followed him. When he came to the border of the woods, he said to his escort, "Stay here while I go attack the giants." Then he sprang into the wood and looked about him right and left. After a while he caught sight of the 2 giants. They were lying down under a tree asleep, and snoring so that the branches shook. The little tailor, all alone, filled his pockets with stones and climbed up the tree, and made his way to an overhanging bough, so that he could seat himself just above the sleepers. And from there he let one stone after another fall onto the chest of one of the giants. For a long time the giant was quite unaware of this, but at last he woke up and pushed his comrade and said, "What are you hitting me for?" "You are dreaming," said the other. "I am not touching you." And they composed themselves again to sleep, and the tailor let fall a stone on the other giant. "What can that be?" cried he. "What are you casting at me?" "I am casting nothing at you," answered the first giant, grumbling. They disputed about it for some time, but as they were tired, they gave up at last, and their eyes closed once more. Then the little tailor began his game anew, picked out a heavier stone, and threw it down with force upon the first giant's chest. "Hey now, this is too much!" cried he, and sprang up like a madman, and struck his companion such a blow that the tree shook above them. The other paid him back with a ready coin, and they fought with such fury that they tore up trees by the roots to use as weapons against each other, so that at last they both of them lay dead upon the ground. And now the little tailor got down. "Another piece of luck," said he, "that the tree I was sitting in did not get torn up too, or else I should have had to jump like a squirrel from one tree to the other." Then he drew his sword and gave each of the giants a few hacks in the breast, and went back to the horsemen and said, "The deed is done. I have made an end to both of them, but it went hard with me. In the struggle they rooted up trees to defend themselves, but it was of no use. They had to do with a man who can kill 7 at one blow." "Then you are not wounded?" asked the horseman. "Nothing of the sort," answered the tailor. "I have not turned a hair." The horsemen still would not believe it, and rode into the wood to see, and there they found the giants wallowing in their blood, and all about them lying the uprooted trees. The little tailor then claimed the promised boon, but the king repented himself his offer, and he sought again how to rid himself of the hero. "Before you can possess my daughter and half of my kingdom," said he to the tailor, "you must perform another heroic act. In the woods lives a unicorn who does great damage. You must secure him. A unicorn does not strike more terror in me than 2 giants. 7 at one blow, that is my way," was the tailor's answer. So, taking a rope and an axe with him, he went out into the wood, and he told those who were ordered to attend to him to wait outside. He had not far to seek. The unicorn soon came out and sprang at him, as if he would make an end of him without delay. "Softly, softly," he said, "most haste, worse speed," and remained standing until the animal came quite near. Then he slipped quietly behind the tree. The unicorn ran with all of his might against the tree, and stuck his horn so deep into the trunk that he could not get out again, and so was taken. "Now I have you," said the tailor, coming out from behind the tree, and putting the rope around the unicorn's neck. He took the axe, set free the horn, and when all of his party were assembled, he let forth the animal and brought it to the king. The king did not yet wish to give him the promised reward, and set him on a third task to do. Before the wedding could take place, the tailor was to secure a wild boar which had done a great deal of damage in the wood. The huntsmen were to accompany him. "All right," said the tailor, "this is child's play." But he did not take the huntsmen into the wood, and they were all the better pleased, for the wild boar had many a time before received them in such a way that they had no fancy to disturb him. When the boar caught sight of the tailor, he ran at him with a foaming mouth and gleaming tusks to bear him to the ground. But the nimble hero rushed into the chapel, which chanced to be near, and jumped quickly out the window on the other side. The boar ran after him, and when he got inside, the door shut behind him, and there he was imprisoned, for the creature was too big and too unwieldy to jump out the window too. Then the little tailor called the huntsmen, that they might see the prisoner with their own eyes. And then he betook himself to the king, who now, whether he liked it or not, was obliged to fulfill his promise, and give him his daughter and half of the kingdom. But if he had known that that great warrior was only a little tailor, he would have taken it still more to heart. So the wedding was celebrated with great splendor and a little joy, and the tailor was made into a king. One night the young queen heard her husband talking in his sleep and saying, "Now, boy, make me that waistcoat and patch me those breeches, or I will lay my yard measure about your shoulders." And so, as she perceived of what low birth her husband was, she went to her father the next morning and told him all, and begged him to set her free from a man who was nothing better than a tailor. The king bade her to be comforted, saying, "Tonight leave your bedroom door open, my guard shall stand outside. And when he is asleep, they shall come in and bind him and carry him off into a ship, and he shall be sent to the other side of the world." So the wife felt consoled, but the king's water-bearer, who had been listening all the while, went to the little tailor and disclosed to him the whole plan. "I shall put a stop to all of this," said he. At night he lay down as usual in bed, and when his wife thought that he was asleep, she got up, opened the door, and lay down again. The little tailor, who only made believe that he was asleep, began to murmur plainly, "Now, boy, make me that waistcoat and patch me those breeches, or I will lay my yard measure about your shoulders. I have slain 7 at one blow, killed 2 giants, caught a unicorn, and taken a wild boar. And shall I be afraid of those who are standing outside my room door?" And when they heard the tailor say this, a great fear seized them. They fled away as if they had been wild hares, and none of them would venture to attack him. And so the little tailor remained a king all of his lifetime. The end.